have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. Do we have any questions from the members? Mr. Gibson?
Thank you very much, Mr. I don't have a particular question for the presenter, but I want to go back to the AG's office. When I was a city council member, we had at least one particular, I guess, shutdown, and maybe you can articulate for me in terms of why. This was the Internet Cafe. That is my understanding that I guess the Attorney General didn't have clear guidelines and for them to operate, and this is, I don't know, so I'm asking the question. And so the district attorney in Los Angeles actually went in and shut them down and confiscate and gave citations. Is that issue resolved as of yet?
Yes.
Or is still ongoing?
In some respects, still ongoing. However, with the passage of Assembly Bill 1439 last session, it added much more clarification to the sweepstakes aspect of it. The Internet cafes oftentimes are operating under the guise of a sweepstakes. So the difference between what a sweepstake is versus what gaming or gambling is was often in question. Jurisdictions were handling it differently throughout the state. The Attorney General's office, in conjunction with the Bureau of Gambling Control, developed a working group, so a statewide working group. Multiple district attorneys' offices, local law enforcement agencies, all engaged in the working group and worked together to develop and ultimately the passage of AB 1439 helped provide some guidance in that respect. So from the Bureau's perspective, what we do is we provide support to local law enforcement agencies who have identified and are investigating a potential Internet cafe operation in their jurisdiction. We provide support as far as expertise, preparation of search warrants, and gathering of evidence. However, it is ultimately the local jurisdiction's responsibility to seek either prosecution or some sort of a civil action against the particular business that's operating.
So did the new law provide clarification in terms of if, in fact, they could exist and operate, or it prohibits them?
It specifically, the language revolves around the sweepstakes aspect of it. Identifies what is unfair competition under the civil code is what it provides clarification for, and further clarification on what a sweepstake is versus what a gaming operation is.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Cooper.
Following up on that, but quite often when local law enforcement stumbles upon an Internet cafe, they really don't have the expertise to investigate that. I know DOJ or gaming has the expertise with that. So it's one of those things where the locals want more help. And also I've heard some complaints that previously most of your investigators came from the B&E side, the narcotics side, and didn't really have a lot of training in Internet gaming. Has that changed over time, or are we still there with those ex-narcs?
It's absolutely changed over time. When the Bureau was created, back then a division of gambling control was created in 2000, the largest draw, our largest bureau was the Bureau of Narcotic Enforcement, so existing special agents were typically drawn from that pool. So they did have a significant amount of narcotic experience. However, over time, through the development of the Bureau and the growth of the Bureau, special agent employees have been developed through various sources and have developed the expertise in gaming-related law to actively regulate the industry in a much better capacity than drawing upon knowledge from a very different type of investigative role, such as narcotics.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, narcs are the best investigators in the world.
You were one,
officers. Right? Yes, I was. I bought a lot of dope.
I remember you.
Undercover, that is. But so, I mean, when these folks are coming in, they don't have previous training. They're getting trained on the job, more or less.
Absolutely, and we continue to do so. We're in the process right now of establishing a California-only course, post-certified course for law enforcement agents not only in the Bureau of Gambling Control, but also in the law enforcement community in general. We're in the final stages of developing that course that's going to be, again, post-certified, that will be offered to not only our agents, but also law enforcement in general, and it'll be specific to California law in relationship to the gambling laws.
You know, the reason I ask that's a lot of work and training goes into getting expertise on gaming, and that's why it's so important that we make sure that the funding is sufficient regarding the officers with that, because these cases just sit there, and obviously the longer the time passes, that's the colder the case gets. And to resolve some of these cases that are outstanding, those 2,400 cases, I would venture to say there's probably slim to none. And that's why you need sufficient resources to go ahead and deal with these issues, and especially in a timely manner. Because, you know, if you're a bad guy, why rob banks? Why deal drugs when you can do the internet gaming or defraud someone? Because it is a white collar crime, and the penalties aren't quite as severe sometimes. So that's why we've seen a lot of folks gravitate towards that and the identity theft. And it's just it really makes sense. Why expose yourself out there to the other things? So they're all gravitating towards this, and that's really where the big money is right now.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
I'm going to turn to Mr. Jager for a minute. I thought you did an excellent job of explaining kind of the interactions between tribal government, state and federal, and how the regulators interact for protection. But who has the ultimate authority in those determinations? And you referenced adhering to all applicable regulations and procedures, but regulations and procedures determined by whom? The buck stops where, I guess, is the question.
Are you talking about suitability standards, or I'm sure I'm not
The
sure.
question's broader than that, but certainly suitability standards.
The ultimate
would be
authority is with the Tribal Gaming Agency as the primary regulator, but we have a series of disqualification or suspension or revocation that deal from prior arrest records or criminal prosecution. All of the actually, I have that here if you'd like to hear it more specifically, if I understand your question. And I think I do. If we're talking about criminal or qualifying criminal behavior or actions to get a license, if you've been convicted of a felony, if you've been convicted of a misdemeanor within the past 10 years that are associated with dishonesty, moral turpitude, a charge that could be disruptive to the facility, such misdemeanors may include but are not limited to convictions related to theft, violence, narcotics, sexually based crimes, or gaming violations, having an outstanding warrant for their arrest or a criminal matter that has not been adjudicated, supplied materially false or misleading information with respect to required information that on a person's background investigation. Now, obviously, if you had a misdemeanor within the past 10 years, I mean, if some of these are not so serious, some of them are not, if they can go back to the court and get the judge to, dismiss the charge, whatever, after a period of time, it's possible that then they could be licensed. So, I mean, but the ultimate authority with the revocation of their license or suspension of their license is with the TGA, and is based on federal and state requirements, as I just read.
Let me expand. If you were to discover a skimming operation at the casino, is there any requirement to report that to the Department of Justice or to the local law enforcement, or how does that work?
Absolutely. If we see something on surveillance or there is a sting operation, as much as we've talked about the credit card fraud thing that was going on, we have a working agreement with the Placer County Sheriff's Office. We have a memorandum of understanding with the Placer County Sheriff's Office. We are in close contact with the Bureau of Gambling Control. We talk with the federal FBI, the federal investigators, the Secret Service. We involve all of those people in that kind of an operation, and we share that information with the FBI and so on. Yes, sir.
But the FBI is not going to come out and investigate the case. Ultimately, it's going to fall upon Placer County or else the Department of Justice. I mean, we can inform everybody we want, but when it comes down to actually working that case and doing that, unless it takes off with some bigger players, it's going to get resolved by one of those two agencies I just spoke about. In most cases, correct?
Yes. The agencies
So-
that you spoke about?
Yeah, and specifically, it's typically going to be the local agency. Is that right?
Yes,
we
we
more
work
times-
closely with the Placer County Sheriff, and people, they come and people are arrested and taken. I'm sure I'm not answering your question, but
No, and they do a great job. But
Yes, they do.
To me, it still comes down to that level of expertise. If there's additional follow up and other things, and that's why it's people that do it every day for a living and not a generalist. Because you have detectives that do a wide variety of investigations, and that's why to me it's important to have someone that's their bread and butter. They do it every day, and nothing else except these type of cases. That's what makes it critical to have these folks involved, wherever it ends up.
yes. And we have a fully staffed security department, and like I say, we don't have authority to arrest people, but the sheriff does, and the prosecution then it goes on through federal courts and so on.
Thank you.
Say,
Okay, do we have any additional questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony, and we'll go ahead and move on to the California Horse Racing Board. Rick Bedecker, Executive Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. As stated earlier, horse racing was legalized in California in 1933 when voters approved the California Horse Racing Act, which established parimutuel wagering, and the California Horse Racing Board, which today is comprised of 7 commissioners appointed by the governor. Parimutuel is a French term meaning betting amongst ourselves. There is no banking of games in racing, but rather the racetrack acts as a kind of escrow company, collecting the monies wagered, deducting the statutory takeout, and distributing the balance to the winners. Data collection is done by a licensed tote company which calculates the odds and winning payoffs. Wagers are made at locations around the world. As wagers are being made, the data is transferred to various regional hubs and then transmitted directly to the on-track tote system. Reconciliation of all transactions and distributions is performed by an entity called California Horse Racing Information Management Systems. The CHRB receives no general funds, but it rather is special funded by the racing industry. Horse racing in California is policed by CHRB. All racing officials, executives, owners, trainers, jockeys, grooms, mutual clerks, veterinarians, and in fact, any participant in a race meet must be licensed by the CHRB. Violation of any of its rules is punishable by the board by revocation, suspension, fine, or exclusion. The board, in short, may punish any misconduct of any person connected with racing. The board also appoints a board of stewards comprised of 3 individuals at each race meet. Currently, there are 18 stewards hired by the board. The stewards are responsible for the conduct of the race meet in every particular. They conduct hearings and impose fines, as well as view the running of every race and make disqualifications if interference has occurred. Violations of medication or other rules are investigated by CHRB investigators. We currently have 14 sworn police officers who gather the evidence and, if warranted, issue a complaint against the licensee. Medication violations are the most common offense in racing. Thanks to the late Senator Ken Maddy, the CHRB has nearly exclusive access to the Maddy Lab at UC Davis, which was established for the very purpose of serving California racing. It is recognized as the finest facility of its kind in North America. Last year, more than 59,000 blood, urine, and hair follicle samples were collected and tested for CHRB at the Maddy Lab. To put that in context, USADA, the United States Anti-Doping Agency, last year tested about 9,000 samples. Each of our samples is tested for more than 1,500 prohibited drugs. When a positive sample is detected, a CHRB investigator completes a report and a complaint is filed and usually adjudicated by the stewards. But licensees can also plead their cases to hearing officers, administrative law judges, and can appeal decisions to the board itself or, of course, to Superior Court. In addition to the 5 purpose-built racetracks in the state, racing is also conducted at 6 racing fairs in Northern California. But the CHRB's regulatory authority goes beyond the racetracks themselves to cover satellite facilities in California. There are 37 off-track wagering locations in the state, including locations at 4 tribal casinos: Barona, Fantasy Springs, Sycuan, and Viejas. There are also many satellites at 2 card clubs, the Commerce Casino and Ocean's 11. So the boundaries of racing extend well beyond the racetrack and even outside of California. On any given day, hundreds of locations in the United States and around the world will be wagering on the races from Santa Anita or Golden Gate. The wagering is conducted by licensed tote companies, with all wagers funneled back to a single pool at the host track. So a wager made by a New York customer on a California race is no different than a wager made here in the state of California. Well, that covers live and simulcast racing, but for the last 13 years, the California horse racing industry has been conducting wagering via the Internet in a regulated and customer-safe fashion. It's called advanced deposit wagering. As such, the horse racing industry is the only legal provider of Internet wagering in California. There are currently 5 Internet advanced deposit wagering companies licensed by the board. Each is licensed for 2 years and must provide a $500,000 surety bond at the time of licensure. Accounts can be established in person, by mail, telephone, or other electronic media before any wagering is conducted. An account can only be established in the name of a natural person and is non-transferable. Any individual prohibited from wagering under CHRB Rule 1980, that would be for violations such as bookmaking, any kind of fraudulent act connected with parimutuel, or violations of several penal codes, is prohibited from establishing an account or placing a wager with an ADW company. The information required to establish an account includes the account holder's full legal name, principal residence address, telephone number, social security number, and age identification. The ADW entity is required to employ electronic verification with respect to each account holder's name, principal residence address, date of birth, and social security number at the time of account establishment. And that must be done by a board-approved national, independent, individual reference company or another independent technology approved by the board, which meets or exceeds the reliability, security, accuracy, privacy, and timeliness provided by individual reference service companies. I'm reading this straight from the regs so I didn't mess it up. The entity may refuse to establish an account if it is found that any of the information supplied is untrue or incomplete. When an account is established, the entity shall designate an account number for each account. The number can be changed, provided the account holder is informed prior to any change. The account holder shall designate a means of personal identification, a PIN, to use to access their account. Last year, more than $570 million was wagered on California racing via the Internet. That's 26.6% of the revenue stream in California. That's the good news. Here's a little bit of bad news. Since the advent of other forms of gaming in California, and the full story here, of course, is that horse racing enjoyed a virtual monopoly for about the first 40 years of its existence, and those were the good old days. But since other forms of gaming have developed in California and prospered, California residents wagering on the amount of money wagered by California residents on California races has declined by 45%. We've also seen the closure of 3 major racetracks in the state: Bay Meadows in San Mateo, Hollywood Park in Inglewood, and most recently Fairplex Park in Pomona. The horse racing industry is responsible for over 50,000 jobs. Many of those are union jobs, contributes about $2.5 billion annually to the state's economy. The impact of that economic benefit goes beyond just the employees, the tracks, or horse owners, but it goes to the California Greenbelt as well, where the horses are born and raised, where the feed is grown for thousands of horses that are racing or in training to race or perhaps have retired from racing. And with the exception of California, most major racing jurisdictions receive some kind of funding from alternative gaming. States like New York, Florida, Kentucky, and Pennsylvania, which are the major racing states in the country. While I don't speak for the horse racing industry as executive director of the Horse Racing Board, I think I can speak for myself as one who's been in the game most of my life. And as a longtime participant, I think it can be reasonably argued that given its long history in the state, its deep roots in the California Greenbelt, and its 13 years of conducting legal internet wagering here, racing should receive every consideration, not for a subsidy, but for the opportunity to participate in internet poker should it become a reality in California. Finally, I would be remiss if I didn't brag about the performance of California-based horses in the ongoing Triple Crown. In the Kentucky Derby, the first 3 finishers were based in California, including the winner, American Pharoah. And on June 7th, American Pharoah will try to be the first Triple Crown winner in, 37 years? Something like that. 37 years. And he will be the second California horse in as many years to make the attempt to win the Triple Crown. And finally, that's the unique thing about racing. We have a spectacular racehorse in the middle of our game, and that's really what keeps us as regulators motivated, because it's our opinion that if we keep the racehorse healthy and safe, that as a matter of fact, just about everything else flows from there. So it's a great sport to be a part of, and it's a great opportunity to be able to protect the integrity of it. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. If in my 37th year of life I both become the chairman of GO and we get a California Triple Crown winner, that'd be pretty good.
All right, let's try to get that done.